entered. Welcome to all of you who are here. This is, of course, the public meeting regarding the City of Hollister General Plan. And we are scheduled to start at 6. It's about 6:05 right now. We had a little delay getting everybody in, and we actually do expect almost twice as many people as are here right now.
Meeting ID,
we might give it 1 or 2 more minutes. While we're waiting, let me say that those of you who can, it would be great if you would put your screen on. We're very sad that these meetings cannot occur in person. And one of the ways that they are most like in-person meetings is if we can all see each other. And I know not everybody has the ability to have their video on technologically or for whatever other reasons. But if you can do that, it would be great so folks can see each other. And I'm just going to give another minute or so, and then we'll get started. All right. Well, welcome everybody. Thank you all for being here. Again, I want to introduce myself. I'm David Early and I'm with PlaceWorks. And our firm is the consulting firm helping the City of Hollister to prepare the new general plan update. And I'm the principal in charge of the project and will be the facilitator tonight. We are recording this presentation, and so I just wanted to alert everyone of that at the very beginning. You'll see the little recording icon in the upper left-hand corner of your screen if you have that on the screen. But we definitely are recording. I wanted folks to know that in case that's of concern to anyone. The other thing right at the beginning is that the City of Hollister is committed to as inclusive a process as possible. And among other things, that means that we want to have Spanish language available to all attendees. So I want to introduce Ricardo Pozos from our office, who's going to make a brief announcement about that in Spanish.
Hola, muy buenas tardes. Muchas gracias a todos los participantes de esta tarde. Me llamo Ricardo Pozos de PlaceWorks. Si alguien necesita ayuda o asistencia en español, por favor, mándenme un chat y les ayudaremos. Gracias.
All right, so and based on the attendance roster that you all filled out, we are not sure that anyone would need Spanish language interpretation, but Ricky has made that available and people will send him a chat message if that's needed. I now want to introduce Eva Kelly, who's with the city staff, and she's just going to provide a welcome as well.
Thank you, David. Good evening, everyone. As mentioned, I'm Eva Kelly. I'm with the planning department with the City of Hollister, and we're happy to have you all here tonight. From the city staff, we have myself, Amber Cameron, Areli Perez, Maria Mendez, Mariah Marsan, and Socorro Zendejas. And then with PlaceWorks, we have David Early, who was speaking with you just a minute ago. We also have Carrie Stone, Ricky Pozos, Lindsay Klein, Tarina Wilson, and Angelica Garcia. And then also on the line with us tonight is from Kimberly Horn, Frederick Venter, who's working with us on the general plan as well, mostly involved in our traffic and circulation element. And we're happy to have you all here tonight. I see 1 or 2 familiar faces from yesterday, but a lot of new faces. So I'm excited to hear from you all. Thanks for being here.
Great. Thank you, Eva. And as Eva mentioned, and some of you know this is the second of 2 workshops that are looking at the policy issues surrounding the general plan. A few of you were on the call already yesterday, and that's great. There's a lot of material to cover. So those of you who were here already yesterday will be able to talk about new things this evening. Those of you who weren't here, you'll see that it is a very exhaustive list that we have of issues to cover. And unfortunately, not everyone will be able to participate in every discussion tonight. We will have reports back from each group, so everybody will know what all the groups did. And we do have a very extensive online survey available. So if tonight just whets your appetite and you want to give additional input about other items that you maybe didn't get to talk about tonight, or other ideas you have about issues that you did talk about, you'll be able to go to that online survey, and I'll give the web address in a little bit, and use the online survey to give us additional input. I do want to also notice that we have 2 staff people from the PlaceWorks team identified for technical and content issues. If you have Zoom questions, you can send a chat message to Torina Wilson, whose name on the screen says Zoom questions. And if you have questions about the project, you can send a message to Carrie Stone, whose name on Zoom is Project Questions, and you'll be able to find her easily to send a note to her. Right now, at this point, we want to just have a poll put up that I believe Lindsay is the person to put that up. There it is. We're just going to ask you to identify how you are here this evening, whether it's as a resident, a business owner, a community organization representative, or other. And we'd also like to find out if people want a tutorial or orientation in Zoom this evening or not. And we're expecting 17 responses, and we have 4, 5, 6 so far. So give you a minute or so, or a little less, for everybody to fill that poll out. So we can see all the kinds of folks who are here this evening and find out if anybody needs Zoom orientation. We're at about 10 of 17 so far, and a little bit plateaued there. So if you're those other 6 or 7 people, go ahead and try and choose the options.
For those of us on the phone, is there a way to participate?
Lindsay or Torina, is there a way to fill out the poll on the phone? Apparently not. No. Sorry about that. So maybe that's why there's 4 that haven't responded. Okay, well, I think we can go ahead and close the poll at this point. Of those who were able to respond, we got 12 responses, and 10 of the 12 of you are residents within Hollister. 1 is perhaps the same person or a different person as a business owner, and there are 3 representatives from community-based organizations here as well. So we've got a good mix. We do have 1 person who asked for a Zoom orientation, and I'm not sure if the best way to do that, should I go ahead and do that, or Torina or Lindsay, is there a way that you could do it offline for us? Or what do you think is the best way for us to do that since it's 1 person?
I think if they can message Torina, or Torina can message them, that would be the best way for them to walk through any questions they have about interacting.
And I don't have a way to know who filled out the poll saying that they would like that orientation. So whoever you are, not to put you on the spot, but are you able to send a chat message to Torina for whatever orientation you need?
And as a reminder, Torina is named Zoom questions, ask me.
Okay, I don't see that person responding. So maybe I will, boy, I hate to take everybody else's time for that. Yeah, I think I'm just going to assume that whoever you are, we didn't hear from you just now, but please do send a message in the chat to Torina, whose name is Zoom Questions. If that doesn't work, you can also, is there an email address that people can send to as well, right?
Yes, if you'd like to send an email to planning@hollister.ca.gov, we are online and we can assist you.
Great, okay. So with that, we're going to go on then into a brief presentation about tonight's work. And I'm going to share my screen in order to do that. So bear with me for a few moments. All right, and so you should be able to see now a title slide for these policy options workshops that we held both yesterday and today. And the rest of the meeting's agenda is here. We've already gone through the welcome and introductions, and I'm now going to give you a brief presentation about the general plan, the policy options, and the exercises we'll be doing. And then I'll be available to take any questions that you may have. And then the bulk of the meeting tonight is going to be 3 small groups. We're going to divide you into groups that you all signed up for in advance. And we'll have a round of a presentation for those issues. You'll have a discussion for about 15 minutes, and then we'll have reports back from each of the groups that meets, and we'll do that for 3 rounds. And we anticipate then finishing those 3 rounds right around 8 o'clock, and we'll be able to wrap up and end the meeting then. Yesterday, I think we went about 10 minutes over, and bear with us if we do that again, but hopefully not much longer than that. So let me talk a little bit about the general plan. And I know many of you know this, many of you, I see your names and recognize you from previous parts of the project, but I do want to just make sure everybody's aware that the general plan is a document that's required by state law. Every city and county in the state of California has a general plan, and it's the blueprint that establishes the community's vision for growth and development and conservation. It has within it usually a vision for what the community might be, and goals, policies, and actions to support that vision. In our case, we're looking at what we call a horizon year of 2040, about 20 years from now. And so we're talking about a vision for the period in these next 20 years. This is a document that's intended to provide consistent policy direction for future development. It's intended to balance growth, conservation, and quality of life. And it also documents environmental conditions so that as development occurs over time, we can understand what those changes are. So the general plan is required by law to have what are called a series of elements, and that's kind of a fancy legal word for chapter. The city's current general plan does have the state's required 7 elements within it, and you see those listed more or less on the left side of this slide. So there is a land use and community design element, that's the state required land use element. There's a circulation element, a housing element, an element on natural resources and conservation, which the state calls a conservation element. Open space and agriculture, the state refers to that as an open space element. And then the final element of the current general plan has both safety and noise within it, and those are both required elements as well. The state also allows cities and counties to create their own customized optional elements. Hollister does have one of those already, which is a community services and facilities element. And then in our general plan, as we're updating it, we'll also be adding elements regarding the arts and economic development, and with some consideration for environmental justice as well, which could be a standalone element or could be incorporated within the rest of the general plan itself. The current general plan was adopted in 2005, so it's just over 15 years old. In my opinion, it's a very good document, but it definitely needs to be updated to reflect current conditions and to reflect changes of state law that have occurred in these last 15 or 16 years as well. The goals for this process are first and foremost to engage a broad spectrum of the community in planning for Hollister's future, and then to establish a community vision for Hollister in the year 2040. We want to maintain Hollister's small town agricultural character. We want to manage growth consistent with community goals. We want to ensure high quality development, support economic development, and as I already mentioned, respond to the state's mandates and its general plan guidelines for what needs to be in a general plan. This project has a number of components that actually go beyond the general plan itself. Not only are we preparing this general plan update, but Frederick Venter, who's here with us this evening from Kimley Horn, is helping us to implement a new state law called Senate Bill 743, which changes the way that we address traffic impacts in California. We're also preparing a climate action plan to address climate change and resilience. We are including a hazard mitigation plan, an environmental impact report to assess all the changes that this includes, and then also a municipal service review, which is the document that needs to be created in order for the city to annex lands in the future. So it's a very comprehensive project. It is also a project that comprehensively covers a large area both inside and around Hollister. And this map shows you with a kind of hard to read black line, but which I'm pointing to with the little hand on my screen, the city limits, which of course are part of what's considered for the general plan, but also the sphere of influence, which is shown in the yellow line, which is the line where the city is currently recognized as probably going to grow into in the future. The urban service area, which is shown with the red line, which is the area where some city policies currently allow the extension of services, even into unincorporated lands under county jurisdiction. And then an even larger area shown in this purple dashed line, which is what we call the planning area, and which is called out in state law as something that the city should have. And that's the area that the city believes whether development or conservation were to occur under city auspices or the county auspices, that anything within this line would affect the city of Hollister, even if it's not inside the city of Hollister. So you can see that that extends down almost to Tres Pinos. It includes Ridgemark. It includes, of course, the airport and rural and agricultural lands on all sides of the city, and going all the way out to the wastewater treatment plant along the San Benito River on the west. So it's a very comprehensive planning area, as well as a comprehensive scope of work. It's a scope of work that also includes very significant opportunities for public involvement. We have a series of workshops and events like this one this evening. We have online activities that I already mentioned, and I'll be talking about again in a moment. We have a general plan advisory committee that is going to start a series of 5 meetings at the end of this month, and they'll be meeting for 5 out of 6 weeks. It's a very exciting time that the city is just adding several members to the GPAC, and there was a very robust number of applications received for 3 slots on the GPAC, which we're hopeful that the council will consider at its meeting next Monday night. We'll also be making regular reports to the Planning Commission as well as to the City Council. And of course, due to COVID-19, all of this outreach right now is happening with using virtual technology. I certainly am hopeful that by the end of the process, we may be able to meet in person again as well. We do also have a really great website that's already up and running. It's been up for quite a while. This is what the website looks like, and it is at hollister2040.org. I imagine many of you went to that website in order to register for tonight's meeting, but if you haven't been there, or if you didn't get a chance to take a look at other parts, please do take a look and really get to know the items on that website. Right now, there is an online engagement exercise to provide input about all the policy options we're going to be speaking about tonight, and some we aren't even talking about tonight. So if you have time and interest, we encourage you to go onto that website and fill out the survey there as well. Here's an overview of the schedule and process for this, for the general plan update. And we're right now on the 3rd line, the blue line that says policy assessments and design alternatives. We've already created an exhaustive analysis of baseline conditions and future trends, and we've already drafted a vision statement, which I'll show you in just a moment. With that vision in hand, we're now looking at policy and design alternatives. That's what we're going to be speaking about tonight. Once that work is done later this spring, we'll go into the process of drafting both the general plan and the other work products, particularly the climate action plan, the hazard mitigation plan, and the environmental impact report. And we expect that all of that will get done by the fall of this year. Once that's all complete and drafts have been published, it's still about a 9-month process to go through an entire adoption process, which will include public review, review by the GPAC, review by the Planning Commission, and then ultimately the City Council. So we're really still right at the beginning of the process. The draft documents are by no means ready. We're talking tonight about the kinds of things that might be in the general plan, and it's with your guidance that we'll then be creating the general plan and other work products for public review. So here is the beginning of the vision statement that we've already put together. The vision statement includes both a set of draft value as well as the vision itself. As we put the vision together, it became clear that people in Hollister really value these 4 things that you see here: equity, diversity, innovation, and sustainability. And so the beginning of our draft vision statement talks about these 4 values. And then it goes on with some text that's only this long. It's only about a page of text on an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper. And it talks about what we hope and what you've articulated that you hope that Hollister will be like, even as it changes over the next 20 years. And I'm not going to read this in detail, but if you glance through it, you'll see that it really focuses on the natural surroundings, the agricultural uses, Hollister's character as a small town with a very historic character and a very strong downtown, but also a place that will become more and more a focus for business, an innovation hub with economic development, with tourism and other kinds of industries within the city. So these are all parts of the vision, and I encourage you to go online and read this draft vision. We'll be taking it to the City Council for preliminary approval as part of our report when this current phase is complete. For tonight's meeting and moving forward with the GPAC meetings over these next couple of months, we're looking at a total of 24 separate issues, and you see them all listed here, ranging from parks and new school funding, all the way at the end of the list to climate change and natural hazards. And all of those items are available for discussion tonight. Some of them have been merged into a couple of overarching topics to make the discussion times relatively equal to each other. And you've all signed up for specific parts of the meeting. And so you'll be talking about some subset of these items tonight. If there are items that you don't get to talk about tonight and that you'd like to give feedback about, that's the place to go to the online survey and to provide feedback there. And then all of these items are the items that the GPAC will be considering at its 5 meetings that will occur starting at the end of this month. Tonight, you'll be assigned into breakout rooms based on your pre-registered topics. There were a couple of people who signed up for things where there was only that one person who signed up. So unfortunately, we don't have a small group to cover those. But if that was your case, you are always welcome to sign in to the website and provide feedback there. There'll be 3 rounds of group discussion, about 15 minutes each, and each of those will be preceded by a presentation that I'll give about the subjects to be considered. Once the small groups end, we'll have brief reports back from each group, and then we'll go into the next round after the reports back. Staff and consultants who are here are going to take notes on all the input. There will also be reports back. So there's going to be a very comprehensive recording of all the information that's given tonight. When within your groups, as I said, we'll give the presentation on the topics. You'll be able to introduce yourselves very briefly. You'll talk about the policy options. There'll be a note taker recording the comments, and then you'll agree on a summary to give as part of the reports back, which are intended to both identify common ground and also to note any areas of diverging opinions. When you are in your groups, we encourage you to speak from your own experience. Sometimes people say, well, I think most people want X, but we really want to hear from you tonight what you think, not your assessment of others, but your own ideas. At the same time, of course, we want you to listen to each other. We want you to respect any differences among yourselves and to be curious about those differences. We want to make sure everyone gets to participate. So if you have a tendency to talk a lot, like I do, you might want to hold back a little. If you're a person who talks a little less, we really want to make sure you know that your thoughts and questions are very valuable to us, and we encourage you to speak up and say your thoughts, and your facilitators will be there to make sure that it really is a balanced conversation. And then I just wanted to wrap up this presentation by reminding you of the next steps that I already talked about. There is the online survey at hollister2040.org. And then there are the GPAC meetings that start on Tuesday, March 23rd. Will be at 6 p.m. They will be at 6 p.m. on 5 Tuesdays out of 6, on March 23rd, 30th, April 6th, and 13th. Those are 4 Tuesdays in a row. Then we skip a week, and then April 27th is the last of those. So those are all public meetings held virtually, and we encourage you to attend those as well. That's the end of my presentation. I'm going to stop the screen share, and we can open up for any questions you may have before we go into the first round of groups.
David, I received one question asking for more information about the climate action plan component.
Okay, well, the climate action plan is a document that's intended to respond to the issues of climate change. And the state actually almost requires every jurisdiction to have one. It's highly encouraged, and there's a lot of reasons why every jurisdiction does create a climate action plan. It's a document that will first document the greenhouse gas emissions that result from activity in the city of Hollister today, and then it will suggest a series of programs that the city can put in place to lessen those greenhouse gas emissions, all with the goal, of course, of minimizing climate change. This document will also suggest possible implications of climate change in terms of changes in the climate, heat, drought, and so forth, and it will suggest ways that that the city might respond to those climate change issues as well. Other questions? If you have one and you want to speak up, you can just talk. We're a small enough group. No, not everybody's talking at once. Go ahead. Okay,
How
well,
does, I have one more, David. How does PlaceWorks evaluate and incorporate public input?
okay, well, so that's a great question, and public input is a very important part of this process. I will say it really falls to the General Plan Advisory Committee and then the Planning Commission and the City Council to be sure that the public input is really reflected. What we will do is we will summarize everything we hear tonight, everything we heard yesterday, everything that we get in the survey information, and we will use that to give as input to the GPAC as the next step. And when they give us input about what should go into the general plan, the GPAC will consider all that information, and then the GPAC will make a series of recommendations that we will incorporate into the document. We will bring those forward to the Planning Commission and City Council for confirmation, and then we'll prepare the general plan based on that. So everything that's said tonight, that was said yesterday, and that will be said through the survey information is all very important input that will be summarized and will go directly to the GPAC as it makes its decisions about the general plan itself.
David, I received a question sent to me. How will the public engagement strategy be updated as we move into the orange tier?
That's a great question also. The public engagement strategy was actually created before the pandemic, just a few months before the pandemic, but before the pandemic nonetheless. So we've actually modified it at this point to reflect the fact that we have been in the purple and red tiers and everything has been having to happen virtually. Right now, the city is still holding most of its meetings primarily virtually, although some people are attending some meetings in person. PlaceWorks will be working closely with city staff and will be determining the correct time at which we can move from those exclusively virtual meetings to more in-person meetings. In the past for projects like this, and in our work program, we have, for instance, talked about going to the farmers market, going to businesses along San Benito Street, going to other public events to tell people about the general plan update, and then having our meetings like this one in person so that we can all see each other and really have robust conversations instead of having to do them online. So those are some changes you might see when city staff believes that it's appropriate to go to in-person congregation.
And there's one follow-up that is, what community groups are listed for proactive engagement to ensure diversity?
I'm not sure I have those on the tip of my tongue, but I think Carrie does. Carrie, can you mention the organizations that we're in touch with regarding diversity and outreach?
Sure. I want Amber to correct me if I say this wrong. Is it LULAC, Amber? Yes, LULAC. And then we are also touching base with 2 other local community organizers, and we are working with them.
And we also, just a housekeeping item, there's one person who's signed on with a telephone number only, ending in 8234, and whoever you are, we cannot put you in a group without knowing who you are. So can you, if you have access to speaking, can you say your name?
Yeah, this is Paul Ravella. I apologize. I'm running behind. I will be in front of my computer in about probably 20 minutes.
Okay.
So
Well, great. I think that's all we need. We'll put you based on your phone number into the groups, Paul, that you signed up for. Does that work, Lindsay?
Sure.
Yep, that works.
Great. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Well, then without further ado, I'm going to go on now to my next presentation to talk with you about the issues that we need to look at tonight. And this is going to, again, take a minute to get it up on the screen. So bear with me. Can you see the screen now? Can you all see the slide that says small group round 1? Yes, good.
Yes.
Yes.
Great. So the way this will work, and some of you were here yesterday to know about this, there are 4 groups in each of the 3 rounds, but there is also some repetition of topics. So here for the first round, I'm going to be making 4 presentations, which will take a little bit of time. But then as we get to rounds 2 and 3, some of these items are being repeated and I won't repeat them again. So if you are signed up for one of these topics in rounds 2 or 3, do pay attention now. And even if you're not signed up for these particular topics, you might find them, I hope you'll find them interesting. So I hope you'll be able to pay attention as we go through all of them. So in round 1, you all are going to be discussing parks and new school funding, economic development, special planning areas, and housing. So I'm going to talk about each of those a little bit at this time. Parks and new school funding will also be coming up in round 3. And in the category of parks, one of the bigger issues we're going to be talking about is the city's requirement for new development as to how much parkland is dedicated. Right now, through the 2005 general plan, there is a standard of 4 acres of park space being dedicated for every 1,000 residents. The 2018 Park Facility Master Plan suggested that that standard should change to 5 acres. So one of the questions we're going to ask you tonight is whether you would like to see that standard increased. Currently, the city has 3.5 acres per 1,000 residents. The visioning process has also indicated to us a support for increased parks and targeted improvements to a number of parks, including Vista Park Hill and some others. So some of the questions you'll be looking at tonight are what park policies and actions, if any, should be included in the general plan, and you'll have this list in front of you. And you'll also be looking at that question of an increase in parkland provision. For new school funding, there's really one big issue that we need to be looking at, and that is about the fact that the state mandates that school impact fees can be collected to build new schools, but there's pretty much universal agreement that those fees, as they're limited by law, are insufficient to construct actual new school facilities to meet the demand created by new students. There are various ways that communities address that. They sometimes float bonds among the voters. They can sometimes get state grants for new schools. They sometimes work with developers to get the developers to voluntarily pay additional funds to fund schooling. But we want to talk with you tonight about what forms of additional funds, if any, should be included in the general plan to attempt to ensure adequate collection of funds to cover construction costs of needed new school facilities. So that's the other item that these groups on parks and schools will be looking at. The next issue that you're going to be looking at this evening, or some of you will be looking at, is economic development. There will also be an economic development group meeting in round 3. And that group is going to look at a series of issues. First, about economic development in general, what should be in our new economic development element, focusing on goals, policies, and actions to diversify jobs, support local business, increase retail options, and support the city's fiscal goals. So we'll be asking you in general, economic development policies and actions that might be included in the general plan. You'll have this list in front of you to consider. We'll also be looking at the issue of what's called retail leakage. And that's this notion, leakage refers to the idea that if you live in Hollister, but you go and spend your money elsewhere, that's dollars that could have been spent in Hollister, but they have leaked out of the community and they've gone elsewhere instead. So I have a dog in my room suddenly. It was a little distracting. Shula, can you go away? Sorry about that. This is Zoom, huh? This is how Zoom works. Sorry about that. So we want to talk about what things might be done to provide additional retail opportunities in Hollister and to minimize retail leakage. So again, we have a list of quite a number of items that might be considered to address retail space in the city, and you'll be looking at that list as well. We're going to be looking with you at job creations. What are the steps that the city might take to enhance job creation throughout the city? We've got a couple of ideas, and you may come up with others as well. And then we're going to ask you to look at tourism. There's actually about 21,000 tourists per year passing through or around Hollister to go to Pinnacles National Park and the State Vehicular Recreation Area, but very few of them actually stop in Hollister. The highways go around the city. The city doesn't offer a lot of amenities for those tourists. So we're wondering what the general plan might include to spark more tourist-related economic development. And again, we have a pretty long list of ideas, and we want to get your feedback about those. So that's it on economic development. The third group in this first round will be looking at special planning areas. And we're looking at 3 particular areas around the city that are shown on this map in blue, green, and purple. The blue area is the Buena Vista corridor, the green area is Meridian Road, and the purple area is the Union Road corridor. And we want to get your feedback on what land use designations should occur in each of these areas, which were identified at the outset of our process by city staff. So in the Buena Vista area, we have a series of options. This is how the general plan looks in that area today. And we have a series of options that range from, you see a lot of green on this map, meaning lots of agriculture, all the way through a little bit of agriculture, about half agriculture and half new development, which is shown in the buff color, or all new development, shown in this buff color here on the entire area. You see no green on this map, and then a couple of others, even more intensive options as well. So that's the Buena Vista Road area. We're also going to have you look at Meridian Street, where we've got an existing general plan like this, and the possibility of perhaps extending Meridian Street through this area, and perhaps changing land use designations in the area as well. And then finally, in the Union Road area, we have the most options there, looking at what land use designations might occur in that area on either side of Union Road, from San Benito Street all the way over to the highway. We're looking at options, again, that are all agricultural, with a mix of agricultural and urbanized uses, and then with all urbanized uses as well. And you'll notice on these diagrams that there's a half circle that shows a possible mixed use node along Highway 25, and that can be toggled on or off in each of the alternatives. So you've got a lot of options to talk about there in the small group on special planning areas. The fourth group in this now will be working on housing, and there are 3 main issues there. The first is considering high density residential and how the city might further accommodate essentially apartments and townhouses. State law requires that the city have some designations that are a minimum of 20 dwelling units per acre. The city does not currently have that. The city's highest designation right now has a base of 12, and the state requires that some areas have a base of 20 or more. So we have a map here showing you some areas that we've identified that might be appropriate to apply that minimum of 20 units per acre. You may have other ideas as well. We also want to hear from you if you would like to increase the maximum allowed density in both the high density area and the downtown from what's currently 35 dwelling units per acre, which is really not much more than townhouses, up to 65 or even 125 dwelling units per acre to accommodate more substantial apartment buildings within some of those areas. You'll also be looking at inclusionary housing, which are programs that allow or require developers to dedicate a certain percentage of new market rate housing for low or moderate income households. We'll be asking you to consider whether this would be a good idea or not, what types of housing developments it should be applied to, what percentage might be required, and whether there should be alternative compliance methods, such as paying a fee instead of building those units. So those are the things that the housing group will be looking at when we get started now. So with that, I'm going to stop the discussion and allow you all to get into your groups. Lindsay will be placing you in the groups. I will stop the share of my screen, and you'll have a facilitator there to answer any questions you may have about those items, and then you'll be able to start your discussions. Enjoy the talk.
Hi, everyone. You're going to get a notification in just a moment here, and it'll ask you to join a breakout room, and go for it. So join your small group discussion. Hi, Art. Do you need some help joining your group, or did you receive a notification for this? Now, Art, I can't hear anything. Doesn't look like you're talking, but you were invited to join a small breakout room, and you are free to go there if you'd like. Let me see. I have you set up to go to housing. Does that sound okay to you? I can't hear anything you're saying. Hey, Mariah.
Yes.
I think you were, yeah, could you
Oh,
hear
sorry.
me when I
didn't see my name in any of the groups. Did you want me just to join one or just wait?
So I was saying you can stay if you want to. I just assigned someone to be a note taker somewhere, but if you don't want to stay.
All right, welcome back, everyone. I at least had an opportunity to go to 2 of the 4 groups, and it seemed like they were having some very interesting conversations. I know it's a very tight time frame, so not everybody got through everything, but hopefully you at least got to whet your appetites. And perhaps if you didn't get to give feedback on all the things, you'll fill out the online survey. Let me ask who is going to be the spokesperson for the group that talked about housing?
It will be John Casey.
John, can you go ahead?
Sure. So we talked about there was some general talk about communication and how the plans get communicated both to residents in areas where additional housing is going to be, especially high density, and also the schools, because the impact to schools when you build high density housing and how many more students could be expected and the strain on the resources for the schools. That said, there was thought that we should have generally an increase to the number of housing units, the 20 dwelling units per acre. I think had general consensus in our group with some caveats like where that might be. And so when we got to the map, that kind of gave us another view to say, yeah, these places look like, especially ones that are already designated for higher density, made sense to put those units there. But we also had concerns about parking and being able to, make sure that developers include parking on in their plans, so we don't, stress out the street parking even more, and also make sure that we have adequate access in case we need to evacuate the city for some reason, that we have good, ways to get out of the city, especially from the higher density areas. So we had general consensus. We were a little less thrilled with the pink areas as we were with the brown areas. We don't want to look too much like we're sprawling out there with a whole bunch of apartments that are kind of setting up outside of the city. So I think we were a little happier with the brown areas than we were with the pink areas, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that does. Yeah, thank you very much. And I should have said, and John, you did a great job, but we want to try and keep these about a minute. I think you were about a minute and a half there. You had a lot to cover, material to cover, but let's see who's going to do economic development, and if you can maybe do a 60-second review for us. Who's the speaker on economic development?
That should be Chris, if you're on, Chris.
Chris, go ahead.
I lost time because I was on mute. So we talked about the importance of having an economic development coordinator, somebody who could help really define the identity of Hollister a little bit, to really kind of make us a destination. We've heard about the biker rally for a long time, but what else can we be known for? So we're really looking for somebody to own that. We've got 21,000 people, annually coming through town, whether it's to Hollister Hills or to the Pinnacles. I'm sorry, I don't recall which one. How do we get them to kind of stay, a little bit and kind of spend some money along the way instead of just passing through? One last thing we talked about was on retail leakage, and so many people are leaving every day to go to work, right? I've done that drive for a very long time. What can we do to bring jobs here? What can we do to bring those desirable jobs here, high tech, high paid jobs, so that way people won't have to leave? So then retail leakage won't be happening.
Great. That was great, Chris. Thank you so much. Really appreciate that. Who is our spokesperson for special planning areas?
That would be me, Paul Rivella.
Great, Paul, go ahead.
We talked about the Buena Vista Special Planning Area. We reviewed 5 options ranging from preserving agriculture to increasing residential uses. The discussion was putting residential next to agriculture sometimes presents issues, a mixing of those uses. We talked about the types of housing projects that encompass or illustrate high density, mixed density, and low density around town. For examples, we talked about the fact that there's already services located in that area, so it makes sense for growth to occur there. There's a school, there's reclaimed water pipelines, there's city water and sewer in that area, and there's already development pressure going there. So we talked about Buena Vista, being a common sense area for future growth in the city.
Great.
Did I miss anything else? I think that was it.
Great, thank you very much, Paul. Great summary. Last group for this first round was parks and schools. Who would you have to prepare to present there?
Go for it.
Christina, are you there? You gonna speak?
Sure, sister. We lost Socorro's notes. I think for the first one, G1, there was general consensus as far as Susan and I that spoke, is all the top 4 are good considerations. But then also I had added a number 5 is allowing for developers to proactively construct public spaces and parks versus paying impact fees, because it gets it done faster and actually has a better chance of getting it done.
Okay, great. Did you all talk about the school situation at all?
We did. As far as number 2, I serve on the oversight committee for the 2 elementary school bonds. And part of the issues with delays in construction had been there could have been better and more effective management of the bond measure investments, better communication and getting the construction projects out to bidders. And then there were delays with construction due to the impacts of the economy and then also with COVID.
Mm-hmm.
And if I may, Christina.
Absolutely.
Yes, we also talked about support for the policy items there, 1 through 4, particularly items 2 and 3, because it's very difficult for the existing community to pay fully for any gap funding that would exist from development. So
any increase in utilities or bonds or measures, we're reaching a point that we can't politically pass those anymore.
Mm-hmm.
We need to find a better way. And then we also talked about, going to the private sector for development of public facilities, performing arts facilities, a new library, et cetera. There's pent-up demand. And if there is a vision, if there's a plan, if there's a private capital campaign, if we can work with the Community Foundation and other groups such as My Business Council, I think we can get a lot of this work done. We just need a common vision. We need leadership within the community and consensus to move forward versus being mired in struggles.
Okay, well, thanks for those thoughts. And private sector funding is certainly an interesting option.
David, I can tell you there's millions of dollars
we need to move on.
being invested in other communities that can be invested here.
Yeah. All right, well, great input. We're gonna stop that screen share and I'm gonna go to my screen share instead and move on to round 2 of the meetings. I'll give another brief presentation and then we'll get you into your groups again. So in round 2, hopefully you know which of these you signed up for. There's going to be discussion about farmland mitigation, sensitive habitats and heritage trees. There's going to be a discussion about growth management, about circulation and traffic, and about arts and culture. For the farmland limit, I need to, let's see. Can you all see the screen? Yeah, okay. So on the first of these topics, farmland mitigation, habitats, and trees, the city, of course, is surrounded by farmland, both pretty active farmland to the north with crop production, and then more rangeland and grazing to the south and east. CEQA, the California Environmental Quality Act, does generally require that when development occurs, that needs to be mitigated by preserving other agricultural land, and that mitigation typically happens at a ratio of 1:1 or 2:1. The city has been requiring that at times, but does not have a specific policy to do so. So our first question for this group in the general plan is whether farmland mitigation should be required, and if so, at what ratio, what the city's role should be in that process, and what types of farmland should be mitigated. That same group will also have a chance to talk about sensitive habitats, particularly for California red-legged frog and California tiger salamander, which generally occur over here in this hatched area on the east side of town. And the question would be whether future residential development should be allowed in that area, or and to what extent, if so, it would be prohibited to go into areas where there's known habitat for those species. And then finally, we're asking this group to look at the question of heritage trees, what kinds of protections the city would like to put onto heritage trees. The current general plan promotes their preservation, but doesn't have a clear definition of what constitutes a significant tree, and there's no measures for that tree preservation. The second group in the second round will be looking at growth management. The issues around growth management primarily apply to two different issues. One is the sphere of influence, and this is, of course, the area that's shown with this yellow line. I mentioned it before, and it's legally defined as the area where the community expects to grow in the future. And given our projections about growth, we anticipate that over these next 20 years, in addition to what's already been approved, the city might add somewhere between 2,000 and 6,800 units per year total. So over 20 years, that's about 100 to 300 additional units per year. Those could already be included within the city if it's a lower number, and also if they're primarily higher density or mixed use or apartment units. If it's to be a higher number, and or if it's going to be largely single family homes, then that's going to require additional land to be added to the sphere of influence. So we have several other options, not only keeping the sphere of influence as it is, but also looking at some new areas. You see this little buff area down at the lower edge here as one small increase of about 70 acres, roughly 220 acres with a slightly larger area to the south. Roughly 600 acres with additions to the sphere both to the north and south, or even expanding to all the areas that the county general plan anticipates seeing urbanization, which is a much larger area still. There's also some issues around wastewater service, because the city does provide wastewater service to the county areas as they're urbanized. That has been happening in a way that is probably not completely consistent with state law at this time. In fact, state law says that city services should only be extended inside the sphere of influence if it's an area that's expected to be annexed soon. And it should only be extended outside the sphere of influence only to resolve issues of public health and safety. The city so far has actually been extending services pretty much as asked by the county, and perhaps that policy would change. So this growth management group will also be looking at a series of questions around the wastewater treatment plant and extension of services there. The third group will be looking at traffic and circulation, and we'll be looking at a couple of different issues. One is about complete streets and safe routes to school, how we can add sidewalks, bike lanes, transit lanes, frequent crosswalks, median islands, and curb extensions throughout the city, and particularly to make transportation to school easier for students. So we'll be looking at the level of which those kinds of policies should be in this general plan. You'll also be looking at the concept of level of service, which talks about delay on the roadways. It's measured in a scale that goes from A to F, and it's a little confusing, I think, for many people, because when we were all in school, think we all strove to get A's and B's. So it's easy to think A and B is the level of service that we should have in our roadways as well. Well, in fact, it turns out that C is pretty darn acceptable, and many communities even accept D and even E. And it's only F that really is a problem in many communities. Hollister's general plan says everywhere should try and be at C. That may not be realistic moving forward. Frederick will be in the group to talk with you about this, but we're wanting to ask whether some areas of the city might be allowed to go in some cases from C to either D or E in some locations. And then finally, this group will be looking at roundabouts. The city already has policies that support roundabouts, and we want to know the extent to which those policies might be enhanced or moved forward. The last item in this fourth group will be looking at arts and culture. That group will be looking at the various arts and cultural organizations that exist in the city. They're looking at a series of potential goals for arts and culture that are listed here and that you'll have in front of you. And then also some potential policies and actions in general about arts and culture, about potential funding approaches, and also about the types of facilities and events that the general plan might encourage. So a lot of different issues about arts and culture as well. So that wraps up my presentation, and I'm going to stop the share again and allow all of you to, Lindsay will put you into your next round of groups.
All right, everyone, we're back at it. To join your, just a second, you're going to get a notification. Okay. Off you go.
All right, we're back. I got a chance to listen in on a few of the groups. Seemed like good discussions again. And why don't we start with reports back, this time from the group on arts and culture.
Hello. So we talked a lot about creating a city position for like an arts representative or an arts commission. And that kind of fell in line with sustainability of arts within Hollister, which of course would require funding, which was a major thing we talked about. A lack of public funding for arts, where a lot of our funding comes from privatized foundations. We also talked about the current available arts and performing arts buildings or just venues. We do not have a lot of them in Hollister. So maybe when we talk about land development or designating land, that is in the consideration that arts is brought into that conversation. We also talked about art as part of the downtown revival and bringing tourism and money back into downtown.
Great. That's a wonderful review. I really appreciate it, Catherine. Thank you. Who is going to be the spokesperson on circulation and traffic?
Oh, that's going to be me, John.
Excellent. Go ahead, John.
So looks like a few things that we talked about were safe routes around the schools in particular. Quite a bit of time was spent discussing egress and et cetera at the schools areas, and the apparent lack of control of speeds and what have you around the schools. Somebody brought up that there's some inconsistencies in the existing policies about intersections around the schools, where some are surrounded by four-way stops and others are not. Also, increasing the amount of calming features to help to ensure the safety of the streets in those areas. There were probably some other things that you guys want to help me?
Anybody want to add anything for John? John, I was there for part of it, and I thought you actually did a great job of summarizing. But before we go on to the growth management group, anyone want to add anything on transportation?
Just about future planning, being able to anticipate kind of where the growth areas are going to be and where the next bypass or where the traffic management should be.
Great.
So.
Right. Thank you for that addition, Chris, and thank you, John. Let's hear from the spokesperson for the Growth Management Group.
I think that Carrie picked me, David.
Go ahead, Lonnie. Or, sorry, I know that Lonnie's not actually your name, right? But I've forgotten.
It's Bonnie.
Bonnie.
We basically addressed potentially going to item number 5, which is going to the total, build out of our city, which eventually might happen. What we wanted to do is maybe, have some of the growth go to the northern part of our city. But one of the things that we wanted to make sure that we address is that if we're doing all of this growth that we and our water usage that we would need to have, we also need to have a uniform policy on receiving the sales tax from the county and the TOT and the tax between the city and the county. We also need to make sure that we have the broadband coverage for our area. I know in our area sometimes, in fact, this evening it happened, our broadband will slow down just at random times instead of being conducive to being on high speed all the time. The other thing is having more businesses that we have in the northern part of our area, and that would accommodate both the housing and our growth, and growing that way to expand our city. I know that if we looked at the map, it was also toward the east also. And hopefully that's it.
Great. Thank you very much for that report. And the last group was on farmland mitigation, habitat, and trees. Who's the spokesperson for that?
We had run out of time. Is there anyone who wants to give a brief overview?
Don't all volunteer at once, gang. Well, Torina, were you the facilitator there, or who was?
I sure was, yeah. And most of the people in our group were in agreement. They did feel that we should have policies for farmland loss mitigation, typically either 1-to-1 or 2-to-1. There was a lot of mention of mimicking what the county does so that there's consistency. There was a lot of support for protection of specifically prime farmland, unique farmland of statewide importance, also protection of any sensitive habitat, and protection of heritage trees. Our group was very positive of all of the protection that we talked about in the group.
Great. Okay, well, thank you for that, Torina. We don't normally let staff make the presentations, so you guys in that group, you got off a little easy there, but Torina, you did a great job. Thank you. And next time as we go to the last round, I'm going to try and get 4 people from our participants to make the presentations. So I will go ahead and share my screen again at this point, and we're gonna move on to the final round. And I'm a little out of place here, sorry, let me just jump in. Don't mind me while I do this, here we go. We are going to now go into the final set of 4 groups, and the good news is, for those of you who are sick of my presentations, I only need to give 2 right now. You heard about parks and new school funding already. You heard about broader economic development issues already, and there will be groups about each of those. And then we will have groups also on industrial uses, the airport, and cannabis, and also on environmental justice and climate change. And I will be making presentations just on those 2 items, and then we'll get you into your groups. In the industrial uses, airport, and cannabis, this is obviously an additional part of economic development, but a little more narrowed in on some of the job generating uses within the city. Industrial jobs do already account for about 20% of all jobs within Hollister. There's a land supply to accommodate 8 million square feet of new industrial space. And it seems like there's been quite a bit of demand for various industries. We mentioned here the cannabis industry on this slide, but also high-tech, airport-related uses are all coming into town as well. So we're wondering, we want you to look at a series of policies and actions that could encourage and support industrial uses, ones that might affect the airport, and you'll have these lists in front of you, and then also items that might encourage cannabis manufacturers, cultivators, and or retailers and distributors. So that group will look at all of these job generating uses to talk about what would be appropriate for the city in each of those regards. And then the last item that will be discussed tonight after those other three is environmental justice and climate change. You'll be looking on the subject of environmental justice, the fact that Hollister does not have any state-defined disadvantaged communities, but I think we all know that there are pockets and areas within the city with lower economic advantages than other parts. And the state does now suggest the creation of an environmental justice element in a general plan to look at the items that are shown with the smaller of dots here on this list: access to affordable and nutritious food, bike and pedestrian safe streets, reduced exposure to pollution, public participation in the public processes, and equal access to public services and facilities. So we'll be asking this group to consider which of those items should be addressed and how. And then you'll also be looking at the issues that go into the climate action plan, looking at greenhouse gas emissions and a new climate action plan for Hollister that will establish greenhouse gas emission reduction targets and identify policies and a roadmap to help meet the city's GHG reduction goals. And we have a whole list of items that might be put forward as greenhouse gas reduction strategies. There's 10 of those listed here. And then you'll also be looking at the natural hazards that result from climate change, things like flooding, extreme heat, drought, and wildfires, and looking at measures that might be put in place to help to address those kinds of issues that are likely to arise over the life of this general plan. So those are the items that you'll be looking at within those two groups. And then of course, there are two others on broader economic development, as well as parks and schools. And Lindsay will put us into those groups for our last round. Let me just say that right now at 7:44 on my clock, you'll probably go till about 8, and then we'll bring you back for the final reports. And I think we should be done by about 8:10. So almost on schedule.
All right, everyone, you're going to get a little notification right now, and off you go.
Welcome back again, everyone. I think pretty much everybody's come back, and there was another great round of sessions. So thank you all very much for that. It's 1 minute to 8 right now. If we do 1 minute each on some wrap ups and then a few closing words, we will be done just before 8:10. I want to ask first for the representative from the Environmental Justice and Climate Group to make a presentation. Who will that be?
That would be me.
Great, Sarah.
Okay, so just quickly then, when it comes to the environmental justice element, yes, it should be included. That was well supported. And then we talked about some of the, if I can I read along with what you have here? So what we talked about was making sure that there was affordable housing and that these could be in mixed neighborhoods, that there was in each neighborhood, there was access to fresh food. We talked about mitigating traffic so that there wasn't the pollution that comes from cars being bumper to bumper, and also to add to that, the number of large trucks that use our local highways, making sure that those can move through without idling. And then we want to see if we can increase jobs locally to decrease commuting, decrease the pollutants. There's so many other things that can work towards reducing greenhouse gases, just to change the lighting from incandescent to LED, any movement towards a greener Hollister, and planning so that there is more resilience in the situation if there are power outages, heat waves, and how do you design communities? What was discussed was having neighborhoods with resource centers that could be either warming or cooling places people can go if we should or when we do experience these outages in extreme weather. What else do we have here?
Well, Sarah, I think that's a great review, and I think your minute is about up. So I'm going to stop you, but I think you've done a great job of summarizing a lot of work, a lot of great work that your group did on a lot of important subjects. The other new group in this round was on industrial uses, the airport, and cannabis. Who's going to be the presenter there?
I was going to see if Christina would be up for doing the report back.
Absolutely. And thanks for the opportunity. On behalf of the Business Council and the EDC, the airport, industrial, and cannabis has a big opportunity. The city of Hollister understands that the airport is very fortunate that we have what's called through the fence access for private property in proximity to the airport that allows for private access to the runways and to the airport infrastructure. And I actually participated with the city and the National Business Aviation Association, and to promote the airport and our expanded runway and the depth and breadth. We can land more than 737s at our airport, and people don't know about that. And it's a huge opportunity for manufacturing, for maintenance, for tourism that we haven't been able to take advantage of. So I'm really hoping that with the strength of our chamber and our renewed Economic Development Corporation, that we can take advantage of that and really leverage the opportunity for investment, take advantage of the cost of construction, the lack of land, water, utilities. They're in the Silicon Valley and places now like Morgan Hill and Gilroy. They're getting built to capacity to attract those businesses and those high income career opportunities to lower our amount of out commuting. Because we've estimated that pre-COVID, that 60 to 70% of our workforce leaves our community to work every day. And that's a huge impact environmentally, community-wise, et cetera.
Great. Thank you, Christina. That's great. Maybe just a quick note, if you can, on cannabis, and but we should move on to the other groups too.
Right. I just need it, if you could scroll down so I could see those notes. We did discuss with Israel's support, talking about opportunities for growing the cannabis industry, but a lot of it's having community understanding, staff understanding about if and how commercial and industrial cannabis and grows can be included within our city areas. I think just communication and data.
Great.
We understand that we need to protect areas like our downtown, around schools and around churches, et cetera, from commercial grows and manufacturing, but there's still an opportunity there where the market exists.
Great. Thank you, Christina. That's a great report. Then we had two other groups that talked about two items that were being discussed for a second time. I see parks and new school funding up on the screen. Who's going to present for that? Is that Jan? Someone may be muted if you're talking yet.
First off, we definitely believe that parks need to be required when we are building new developments. We would prefer 1,000 for every 5 acres. We'd like to see the parks be family friendly, have a picnic table there or two. And then we're also in favor of having making a by the river there. The mayor has talked about seeking and building for a travel team where travel teams can come and build it as a tourist area for either soccer or baseball. But it does bring in large revenue on the weekends when these travel teams come. So it would be something that I think would be benefit for Hollister. In regards to the schools, we definitely schools need to be when the developers come to the city or the county before anything is agreed upon. The schools must be in the discussion. The school districts need to be represented. Their representatives need to be at the table because we cannot continue to approve developments and not have the school districts there. Because what happens if it's approved, then who gets footing the bill are our taxpayers. And so we need to make sure that the school districts are involved in the planning process before any deals are approved. And I think that's about it.
Thank you, Jen. Thank you very much for that. Last group was on economic development issues, and who's going to be the spokesperson there?
Hi, this is John. I got voted onto the island. So, you know, we all kind of, as we went through the list, we were all pretty happy with the list. No one really kind of said, don't do anything. I think we really wanted to look at what the money is that's going out of the county and have a little more of a drill down to say, of the 20 some odd million that's being shopped somewhere else, is that a Costco or is it a Walmart? We don't necessarily want that here, but are there smaller opportunities here that could offset at least some of those dollars going out? So I think that was really important. Looking at the leakage, looking at mixed use was big to us as well too. Again, going through the list, none of us said don't do any of those things. We thought a liaison between the city and the county was a great idea, and working to make sure that we're doing those development things and attracting those folks to where the money is going out. Where we think we're also lacking in terms of the tourism is self-promotion. We're doing a terrible job. There's so much here. There's so much beauty and things like that. We need to bring people here, and how do we do that and get much better at self-promoting what's here and what's available in Hollister and the surrounds around us.
Great. Thank you for that excellent summary. And that was the final, that was the 12th of 12 summaries that we just got from John. And that concludes our meeting as well. Let me just remind all of you that there are the online surveys available at hollister2040.org. And that's both an opportunity to give additional feedback about items that you did discuss tonight, and also an opportunity to give input on subjects that you did not get to discuss this evening as well. After we've gotten a chance to look at all those survey results, and we've also summarized the results from tonight's meeting and yesterday's meeting, we'll then be moving into the 5 meetings being held by the GPAC, and those are on Tuesday evenings starting on March 23rd. Those are all at 6 p.m. They will all be available through Zoom links. So we encourage you to come to those as well. I want to thank you all very much for your participation this evening. Let me just ask Carrie and Lindsay, are there any other items that I need to cover before we break?
No.
Okay. Well then, thank you all very much for your time this evening. Really appreciate it. And we look forward to seeing you at future meetings as well. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Everyone, thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.